The wind found the gap in the ambulance bay door and turned it into a whistle, thin and constant, and I remember standing at the nurses' station of Thornfield County Hospital thinking it sounded almost like a person trying to say something. "County just closed both bridges," Nadia said from the desk phone, cupping her hand over the receiver. "We're an island now." I didn't answer right away. I was too busy watching the parking lot lights disappear one by one under snow that wasn't falling so much as being hurled sideways, like the sky had a grudge against Route 6 specifically. "You should have left at the shift change," said Dr. Owen Castellano, coming around the corner with a stack of charts against his chest. "I told you the interstate would close by 9. You also told me the storm would blow past us entirely. Yesterday, at lunch." I said probably. "You said, and I quote, 'It's going to fizzle out over the mountains.' Meteorology isn't an exact science, Ellery. It's more exact than your bedside manner." He almost smiled at that, which annoyed me more than if he'd laughed outright, because Owen Castellano smiling at half effort was somehow worse than Owen Castellano scowling at full effort. I'd worked 2 years of night shifts across from that man, and I still hadn't decided if I liked him or if I just liked arguing with him, which admittedly might be the same thing wearing a different coat. By 10, the last car in the staff lot, mine, had a drift climbing its driver's door like the snow was trying to bury the evidence I'd ever tried to leave. By 11, the power blinked, held its breath for 4 long seconds, and came back on generator hum, dimmer and yellower, like the whole building had aged a decade in an instant. "There goes the good lighting," I said. "There goes my plan to finish that budget report in anything resembling comfort," Owen said, dropping into the chair across from me at the station, like his knees had simply stopped believing in standing. We'd covered maybe 6 patients between 8 and midnight. A broken wrist from a fall on black ice, a wheezing toddler whose mother had white-knuckled her way through the storm rather than wait, an older man from the assisted living down the road with chest pain that turned out, mercifully, to be nothing more than a very bad case of nerves and heartburn. Nothing that should have kept 2 attendings and a skeleton night crew up past 2 in the morning. But the storm didn't care what should have happened. Route 6 was closed. The county plows had, according to dispatch, temporarily suspended operations, which was the kind of sentence that meant nobody was coming for us until sunrise, storm willing. "You know what the worst part is," I said, mostly to the coffee I was pretending was still warm. "I told my sister I'd call her tonight. She's having a rough week. Now she's going to think I forgot." "Call her." Cell service went out around 10:30. Landline in the break room still works, but it's... I gestured vaguely, meaning, it's occupied, it's awkward, it's not private, it's 100 other small true things I didn't want to explain. Owen reached over without asking and slid his own phone across the counter, an old flip model he still carried for reasons he'd never fully explained, something about signal reaching where smartphones gave up. "Landline in my office still has a dial tone last I checked, doors unlocked." I looked at him for a second too long. "You keep a landline in your office?" "I keep a lot of things people find ridiculous." I went and called, and my sister cried a little, and I told her I loved her and that the storm outside was nothing compared to whatever she was carrying, and when I hung up I sat there in his office for a minute longer than I needed to, looking at the framed photograph on his desk, him younger, an older woman with his same stubborn jaw, some lake somewhere, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. I hadn't known that about him. 2 years, and I hadn't known he had a mother who taught him to laugh like that. When I came back out, he'd made more coffee, the bad kind, the kind that tastes like it's apologizing for itself, and he handed me a cup without a word. "Thank you," I said. "For the phone. For this. Don't get used to it. I'm still annoyed you didn't listen to my forecast. You didn't have a forecast. You had a hunch and a superiority complex. They're a package deal." Around 1 in the morning, the wind found a weak seam somewhere in the roof over the east hallway and started making a sound like something trying to get in, low and insistent, and half the skeleton crew jumped every time it groaned. I found myself, sometime after 2, sitting on an overturned supply crate in the equipment closet with Owen, both of us waiting out a lull between rounds, and somehow the conversation slid sideways from patients to nothing in particular. His mother, who'd passed 3 winters back in a storm not unlike this one, which was why, he admitted quietly. Storms like this always hit him a little harder than they should. My father, who still called every single Sunday at exactly noon whether I answered or not, because some habits are just love wearing a schedule. I always thought you were kind of insufferable, I told him, testing the words before I fully committed to them. I always thought you argued with me on purpose, just to see how far you could push before I lost my temper. Did it work? You've never once seen me lose my temper. That's what worries me. What's under there, Owen? He looked at me for a long moment, the generator humming, the wind still trying its low, insistent groan against the roof, and something in his face shifted. Not dramatic, not a movie moment, just a small, honest crack in a door that had been closed a long time. I don't know. Nobody stuck around long enough during a storm to find out. I thought about that sentence for the rest of the night. I'm still thinking about it now, if I'm honest. How much of what we know about a person only shows up when the exits are gone and there's nowhere left to perform for. I've had crushes on people I saw for 5 minutes at a coffee counter and felt nothing real. I'd worked beside this man for 2 years, assuming I had him figured out as difficult and particular and always right and insufferable about it, and it took 1 blocked road and a dying cell tower for me to realize I'd barely scratched the surface of who he actually was. I wonder sometimes whether that's true of everyone we think we know at work, whether it just takes the right kind of storm to find out. By 4, the toddler with the wheeze was sleeping easy, the wrist fracture was casted and dozing in observation, and the old man with the nerves had been talked down twice more by a nurse named Priya, who deserved a raise for patience alone. Owen and I ended up back at the nurse's station, the 2 of us, and the hum of the generator and the snow finally starting to thin outside the window into something almost gentle. Plows are moving on 6, Nadia announced around 5:30, hanging up the phone with something like reverence in her voice, like she was reporting a miracle. Should be clear enough to get out by 7, 8 at the latest. There goes my excuse to keep arguing with you until sunrise, I said. You don't need an excuse, Owen said, not looking up from the chart in front of him, though I noticed his pen had stopped moving. You've never needed one before. Is that an invitation? It's an observation. Make of it what you want. I didn't answer that right away. Outside, the plows were a distant scraping roar, and the parking lot lights were flickering back to their normal white instead of the dim generator yellow, and somewhere down the hall the toddler's mother was humming something soft and off-key to a child who'd finally stopped wheezing. It struck me, standing there in scrubs I'd been wearing for 14 hours straight, smelling like burnt coffee and hand sanitizer, that I felt more awake and more certain of something than I had in longer than I wanted to admit. Ask me again when the roads are actually clear, I told him. Ask me somewhere that isn't a hospital hallway at 5 in the morning. Is that a yes? It's an observation. Make of it what you want. He laughed, actually laughed, not the almost smile from hours before, and for the first time all night the sound of it was louder than the wind. When I finally did leave, a little after 8, the world outside was blinding white and impossibly quiet. That particular hush that comes after a storm has finally spent itself completely, and I sat in my car for a minute before starting the engine, watching him through the sliding doors as he headed back toward the supply closet. And I thought about how strange it is that the nights we complain about the most, the ones we swear will never survive again, are so often the ones we end up missing on purpose. I don't know yet if this is the start of something or just a very long, very cold, very memorable exception to an otherwise ordinary friendship. But I know I've been checking the weather forecast every day since, half hoping, and I'm not sure that's something I should be proud of.